Aside, sarvata, all around, sangam, association, vigyata, being understood, ajita, one who is never conquered, the personality of Godhead, samstiti, actual position, vyasake, unto the son of Vyasa, Jahao, gave up, Sisya, as a disciple, Gangayam, on the bank of the Ganges, Swam, his own, Kalevaram, material body. Translation, furthermore, after leaving all his associates, the king surrendered himself as a disciple to the son of Vyasa, Sukadeva Goswami, and thus he was able to understand the actual position of the personality of Godhead. Purport, the word ajita is significant here. The personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is known as ajita, or unconquerable, and he is so in every respect. No one can know his actual position. He is unconquerable by knowledge also. We have heard about his Dhamma, or place, eternal Goloka Vrindavan. But there are many scholars who interpret this abode in different ways. But by the grace of a spiritual master like Sukadeva Goswami, upon whom the king gave himself up as a most humble disciple, one is able to understand the actual position of the Lord, his eternal abode, and his transcendental paraphernalia in that Dhamma, or abode. Knowing the transcendental position of the Lord and the transcendental method by which one can approach that transcendental Dhamma, the king was confident about his ultimate destination. And by knowing this, he could leave aside everything material, even his own body, without any difficulty of attachment. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, Param drishtva nivartate. One can give up all connection with material attachment when one is able to see the Param, or the superior quality of things. From Bhagavad Gita, we understand the quality of the Lord's energy that is superior to the material quality of energy, and by the grace of a bona fide spiritual master like Sukadeva Goswami, it is quite possible to know everything of the superior energy of the Lord, by which the Lord manifests his eternal name, qualities, pastimes, paraphernalia, and variegatedness. And thus one thoroughly understands this superior or eternal energy of the Lord. It is not possible to leave the material energy. However, one may theoretically speculate on the true nature of the absolute truth. By the grace of Lord Krishna, Maharaj Parikshit was able to receive the mercy of such a personality as Sukadeva Goswami, and thus he was able to know the actual position of the unconquerable Lord. It is very difficult to find the Lord from the Vedic literatures, but it is very easy to know him by the mercy of a liberated devotee like Sukadeva Goswami. Translation, furthermore, after leaving all his associates, the king surrendered himself as a disciple to the son of Vyasa, Sukadeva Goswami, and thus he was able to understand the actual position of the personality of Godhead. So the subject of this chapter, of course, is the passing of, or the circumstances of the passing of Parikshit Maharaj. And the ultimate result of that was that he got the opportunity to hear topics of Krishna from Sukadeva Goswami. And of course, Sukadeva Goswami's story has already been recited, and we know that Sukadeva was very fortunate also to get good Sangha. In fact, he had Vyasadeva as his father. and he got the mercy of Krishna. So though it's not directly related, all the details are not directly related in the Bhagavatam, our acharyas have given more details by quoting from other Puranas about this whole incident of Sukadev. So we do know that Sukadev was what we call Atmarama, which means an impersonalist ultimately. He was very absorbed in the Brahman aspect of the Lord. And of course we have the famous Atmaram verse that shows that even the Atmarama can develop attraction for the Lord because of the Lord's wonderful qualities, which shows the superiority of Bhagavan over Brahman. So in any case, Sukadev started out as Atmarama, and because of that, he didn't want to get born. What's the use of getting born in this material world? Because you look around the material world and then you get your senses attracted to objects and then you fall from your position of Brahman. So therefore he decided he wouldn't get born. So he stayed in the womb of his mother for 16 years. And Vyasadeva was a little troubled by this. So he kept pleading with him, please come out, please come out. And Sukadev said, no, why should I? The world is all useless, it's Maya. If I come out, I'll get attracted to Maya. So I'd rather just sit here without having to see the material world, and I'm completely satisfied, absorbed in Brahman. So no matter how much Vyasadeva tried to persuade him, nothing happened. He wouldn't come out. So then Vyasadeva thought a little bit. And then he decided he would go to Dwarka, because he was in his ashram in the Himalayas. So he journeyed to Dwarka, and then he talked to Krishna, and he persuaded Krishna to come and speak to Sukadeva in the womb. Sukadeva was quite old by then, and he could even hear what was happening outside. Then Krishna also tried to persuade him to come out, and then Sukadeva said, well, I don't want to come out because, I'll get attracted to this material world and I'll fall from my position of Brahman. My senses will get attracted. So then Krishna says, as Supreme Lord, I guarantee that you will not get attracted to Maya when you come out. So then Sukadeva couldn't answer, because if Supreme Lord is guaranteeing that you're not going to fall down, what better guarantee is there than that? So then Sukadeva was forced to come out. But then we see from Bhagavatam, as soon as he came out, he didn't even look at his father, Vyasadeva. He was so detached, he walked away. And Vyasadeva was calling after him, my son, and he just walked away like that. He was completely detached from the father and the mother and whatever. So Vyasadeva, then, because he was omniscient, he could understand what was happening all around and everything, he could understand where Sukadeva was staying, and Sukadeva was actually in the forest, sitting under a tree, and he was in samadhi of Brahman, all like trance. So Vyasadeva ordered his disciples, you go there. And he gave them the exact location where to go, because he could see with his vision, his spiritual vision, where he was. And he said, you recite Bhagavatam to him, because Vyasadeva had recited Bhagavatam to his disciples, so they knew the Bhagavatam also. So you go there and you recite Bhagavatam. So the disciples went to, and they found him, and he was very nicely absorbed as an Atmarama in Samadhi. And they began reciting Bhagavatam. And when they heard the wonderful qualities and activities of Krishna, then Sukadeva came out of his trance of Brahman. Why? Because the wonderful activities of Krishna are more attractive than Brahman. So that shows the Atmarama verse, that even the Atmaramas get attracted to the wonderful qualities and activities of the Supreme Lord. So in this way, Sukadeva Goswami, even though he was an impersonalist, he became a great devotee after that because of the recitation of Bhagavatam by the disciples of Vyasa. So then the Vyasa disciples, they brought him back to the ashrama, and very eagerly he heard Bhagavatam, the whole Bhagavatam from Vyasadeva. And this is how he got the Bhagavatam, and he became absorbed in the Bhagavatam. So it is also said, even in the third verse of the Bhagavatam, that when the Bhagavatam comes out of the mouth of Sukadeva, who Sukha literally means a parrot, so the example is given that the Bhagavatam is the highest fruit on the tree of the Vedas, which means it's like a big mango at the top of the tree, very difficult to get. But when the parrot touches it with his beak, then it becomes sweeter. So in other words, when Sukadeva recites the Bhagavatam, it becomes sweeter even than when Vyasa recited it. So in other words, the disciple surpassed the guru, who was also his father, and it became very, very attractive, the Bhagavatam. So that's why we usually celebrate the Bhagavatam as the words of Sukadeva Goswami, even though it's written by Vedavyas. We celebrate the Sukadev's, because it became very attractive when it came out of his mouth. More attractive. Why is that? Because Sukadeva relished these pastimes, these very exalted pastimes of Radha and Krishna in the 10th canto of Bhagavatam. He was able to relish them to a high degree, more than even Vyasa could. So in other words, his mood was a little bit different, and therefore the Bhagavatam became sweeter because of that. So in other words, so the text is the same, the realization affected the delivery. So Sukadeva Goswami's delivery of the Bhagavatam became even more relishable because of that, his realization behind it. Parikshit was very fortunate to get that opportunity to hear from Sukadeva Goswami, because it was even better than the original Bhagavatam, which emphasizes the fact that, and Prabhupada mentions that in the purport also, that one has to hear from the devotee, and Prabhupada mentions here how the Vedic literatures are very difficult to understand, difficult to find the Lord from the Vedic literatures. Now the whole purpose of the Vedic literatures is to reveal the Lord. Nevertheless, the technique used in the Vedic literatures and even in Bhagavatam is called parokshavad. Not everything, but some aspects are called parokshavad, which means indirect. So in other words, the Lord does not directly reveal the meaning. It's hidden up in various ways. So thus, even in the Vedic literatures like the Upanishads, the Lord appears to be hidden, because when we read those Upanishads, most people get an impersonal realization or understanding of those words. Brahman means no qualities, no form, no activities, and that's the ultimate goal. But if we look more into the details and context of all the statements, then we also understand that Brahman means not the impersonal Brahman, but Parabrahman. That is Supreme Lord, Bhagavan. But you have to really search for that. So that's why it's called covered. Therefore here Prabhupada says it's very difficult to find the Lord from the Vedic literatures, because that technique of covering is often used. It's also there even in Bhagavatam. And later in the 11th canto, when Krishna is speaking to Uddhava, he also says, the sages like this technique of parokshavad, or indirect covered expression. They don't like to reveal everything directly. And I also like that. Krishna also prefers it. So often the secrets or the highest principles are not directly stated. They are hidden a little bit from the common viewer. However, not hidden from the devotees. So that's the nature of literatures in general. Based on that, Bhagavatam gives an example, and Vishnu Chakravarti enlarges that example to say that one of the points of Bhagavatam is that it's not only the highest fruit on the desire tree of the Vedas, because it reveals Bhagavan in his highest aspect, Krishna, and ultimately Mundurya Rasa, which is the sweetest fruit. But also, one other point is that it's hidden. And it's covered up in various ways, so we don't directly perceive everything. For instance, we don't get exactly the name of Radha directly mentioned, etc., and the name of the Lalita and Vishaka are not mentioned directly. So things are covered up. The explanation is that Bhagavatam is like Mohini avatar. Mohini avatar is an avatar of the Supreme Lord who appeared as a woman. Now the Lord appears in all sorts of forms. He is a pig, he's a horse, he's a snake, he's a bird, half lion. So Lord appears in many different forms, and one of the forms he appears as a woman. So Mohini was the most beautiful woman. Of course, she's also got a spiritual body, but she was so beautiful that all the demons got attracted to her. So the Lord took this form and approached the demons with a particular purpose. And of course, the name itself indicates that. That is Mohini avatar. Mohini means bewildering. So of all women, Mohini was the most bewildering. So she had no problem bewildering the demons. So she approached the demons because they had stolen the nectar after the demons and the devatas had together cooperated to get the nectar or the amrita. And then the demons stole it. So then the devatas were all depressed, and the Lord came and said, I will help you. And he took the form of Mohini, and he approached the demons. And when he approached the demons got bewildered because they saw this beautiful woman. And they all became attracted and flattered by her. And she spoke to them, and her words also were bewildering. And finally she said, give me the nectar. Now, how could they give the nectar to anyone else? Because they were fighting over the nectar. Who was going to drink the nectar first? And then suddenly this woman comes and she says, give me the nectar. Why would they give it to her? But they gave it to her. Why? Because she was bewildering. Everyone thought, she's in love with us. She's in love with me. I'll do anything for her. I trust her completely. And I'll give her the nectar. We'll give her the nectar, and she'll give it back to us because she's so wonderful. She's the ideal person. She's very kind to us. So they gave her the nectar without fighting, without doing anything. So Mohini took the nectar, and she gave it to the devatas. So she fooled the demons. So that is Bhagavatam. It also fools the demons. It covers things up and states things in such a way that the materialists and the impersonalists and others, they will look at the Bhagavatam and they'll get a completely different meaning. At the same time, Mohini gave to the devatas. So Bhagavatam gives the meaning to the devotees. So it's not difficult for the devotees to discover the meaning of Bhagavatam. And this, of course, supports the idea of Rupa Goswami and Nectar Devotion, where at the end of the first portion there, of the first chapter, he says that you cannot understand this work, Nectar of Devotion, by logic. It is only understood by taste. So if you have devotion, you can understand. If you don't have devotion, then you'll get some other meaning. So that is what the Bhagavatam, of course, is the highest literature and giving the most direct answer, but still aspects are covered, and you can't understand unless you're a devotee. Right? So therefore it is the devotee who is able to extract the real meaning, and it's the devotee who will give it to another person. So that's why we need the devotee there as well as the scripture to extract the real meaning. Get the meaning of the nectar from the Bhagavatam instead of the superficial things that are there. Okay? Therefore, though the Vedic literature is difficult to understand and purposely made like that by the rishis and by Vyasadeva himself, so that the demons don't distort the highest truth or offend it, Prabhupada says here, it is very easy to know him by the mercy of a liberated devotee like Sukadeva Goswami. So if we go through the devotees, then the neophyte can begin to understand the real meaning of Bhagavatam and get the real meaning out of it instead of the other meaning. So in that sense, Bhagavatam is like Mohini avatar. It hides the nectar or the real meaning from the demons and the materialists, and it gives it to the devotees. So we hear the Bhagavatam through the devotees of the Lord. So Sukadeva Goswami heard it from Vedavyas, and originally he was a impersonalist, but by the mercy of Krishna and Vyasadeva and the Bhagavatam, he became a very great devotee, and he could understand the meaning. And then through his practice and his realization, he got a very, very high understanding of that meaning, and he was able to impart that to Parikshit Maharaj. So he was very, very powerful, and Parikshit was very, very fortunate to get that opportunity. So all of this was an arrangement. In fact, the whole first canto of the Bhagavatam is only leading up to this idea of how was Bhagavatam produced. Because one of the questions asked by the sages in Namasaranya is, now that Krishna has gone with Dharma, what do we do in Kali Yuga? So then the answer given is, Bhagavatam is arisen like the sun in Kali Yuga to dispel the darkness of this age. So it is the personification of Krishna and Dharma. So then, how was it produced? How did it rise like the sun? So then we get the whole story of Parikshit Maharaj here, leading up to it, and we get the whole story of Narada Muni, this whole story of Narada Muni and his realization, and then Narada Muni preaches to Vedavyas, and then Vedavyas, of course, gives to Sukadeva Goswami, and then Sukadeva Goswami gives to Parikshit. So how Sukadeva gave to Parikshit, that's the story here. We have the whole story of Parikshit and ruling the kingdom, and then getting cursed by the Brahmana boy, and then finally Parikshit, he goes off and is about to die 7 days, and then Sukadeva appears. So everything's leading up to that event. So as Ramaswamy explained yesterday, it is unlikely that Parikshit could do such a thing as put a snake around a Brahmana because he was thirsty, because he was self-controlled from childhood. He was a king, he was of ideal conduct. He respected the Brahmanas because that's what a king should do. He was humble, he had his senses controlled, so he couldn't get afflicted by thirst. And then how could he insult a Brahmana because of his thirst or whatever like that? You know, this is Jiva Vega, Vacha Vega, etc. He had complete control over his senses, so how could he do such a thing? And he was of proper conduct, and he was a great devotee of the Lord. So how could he offend the Brahmana like this? And the only answer given by our acharyas is Krishna's arrangement. So in other words, like in the case of Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, how could Arjuna throw down his bow and arrow because he was a Kshatriya? How could he fall into illusion because he's a friend of the Lord? How can someone fall into illusion like this? And it's arrangement of the Lord, which means that the yoga maya, the spiritual ignorance of the Lord operates, not the material ignorance of the jiva overcome by prakriti, but the will of the Lord produces an ignorance in the devotees for his pastimes. So that often takes place in the spiritual world and when Krishna appears in the material world. So we have cases like this where Parikshit Maharaj is all confused, insults the Brahmana, and then he's going to die, and then he says, what should I do? And he goes down and he's going to fast to death. And obviously he's a great devotee already, so he knows what to do also. But suddenly he says, oh, what should I do? And everybody's trying to give answers, and then Sukadeva appears and he begins to recite Bhagavatam. So all of this is an arrangement only, so-called ignorance or confusion or forgetfulness and lack of control of the senses, all is an arrangement of the Supreme Lord in order to have Bhagavatam spoken. Okay? We see also the whole arrangement of the Pandavas disappeared like that, and they left Parikshit to rule all by himself. They gave up everything. Why would they do that? So again, arrangement of the Lord. The Lord arranged for them all to disappear. He also arranges for Parikshit to disappear. But the whole disappearance is arranged in such a way that Kali Yuga gets the benefit by getting the Bhagavatam. So therefore we should never criticize Parikshit Maharaj for his apparently strange offensive act. It was actually an arrangement of the Supreme Lord so that Bhagavatam could appear within this material world and give benefit to everyone. So the actual delivery is very important. Not that suddenly the Bhagavatam appears, but it was given to Parikshit by Sukadev. And Sukadev got it from Vyasa. Vyasa gets it from Narada. Narada gets it from Brahma. This whole lineage is there. So the whole delivery is a personal delivery, which we emphasize, and therefore we talk about a parampara system. That even if we have scripture, we take through the authorities, we take through the devotee, we take through the guru, the words, because as human beings, and if we're just beginning, of course, devotional service, we're bound to make mistakes. We're bound to, even if we have the scriptures, we're bound to misinterpret or distort the meaning, or distort even the commentaries or the purports or whatever, according to our own propensity. We can take the meaning in a completely different direction for our own purposes. So, in order that does not take place, therefore, we do have to have the devotees of the Lord who have some realization of the actual meaning to present it nicely, so we get everything intact and not distorted. And that is why Srila Prabhupada was so emphatic that you have to read the books, Bhagavad Gita as it is. We're not trying to distort anything. We're not bringing out a new twist on, a commentary on the conclusions of the acharyas or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We're not twisting it in any way, not twisting the words of Krishna. So the idea is to get the actual meaning and convey that to the devotees. So that ultimately is the whole purpose of having this parampara and delivery through the devotees. So that is the whole import of this whole first canto, actually, how the delivery takes place from Sukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. So all of this is very, very important for us to understand. Okay, any question there? I don't think it's here. So anyway, speak loudly.
I've given a history of Sukha the parrot, how he was destined to take birth as Sukadeva Goswami.
Our acharyas don't mention that. Now there are stories about the Radharani's parrot, etc., and then there's also got another story, I think, about some bird or something like that. But our acharyas don't mention it, so therefore, for them, it's not so significant.
Because I have heard a story. I don't know if it's bona fide or not, but I believe it was Shiva was very angry with the parrot for some reason. I just can't remember exactly. And Shiva was chasing Sukha, and Sukha happened to come to where Vasudev was speaking the Bhagavatam to his wife.
Oh, okay.
And his wife was just had her mouth open in amazement, and Sukha
went into the mouth. Okay, yeah.
Basically, amalgamated right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's some Puranic story from some other Purana, but our acharyas don't quote that. So. They didn't make it so significant. Yeah.
And I was thinking that I'd heard somewhere that Sukadev actually heard the Bhagavatam in the womb. But
yeah, from the story recited by, or quoted by, I think it is Vishnu Chakravarti, in relation to that, he just says that he heard it when he came out of the womb and he was meditating, and then they recited it, and suddenly he broke out of his samadhi and got attracted. Yeah.
Or maybe getting mixed up with Prahlad hearing it in the womb.
Yeah. No, that was Prahlad.
Okay. So you really didn't hear the Bhagavatam until he actually took birth.
Yeah.
There's a number of stories of Sukadev from, that I can follow the whole thing. and quoting from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he replied to a question one time that in the Puranas we find, he said two accounts. He was born from the Aranya wood one time. There seems to be three, and then he explained that actually in different days of Brahma, appears in different ways.
Yeah.
Definitely there's a story in the Purana that he was the power of Srimati Radharani.
Yeah.
She used to feed him pomegranate seeds. And she used to talk about Krishna and sing about Krishna, and he would fly to where Krishna was, and then back and forward like that. So when they ended their pastimes, then Krishna told him that he has to stay in the world and go to the place of the Bhagavatam. So there's stories like that. There's another one where he appeared from the Aranya wood, and he appeared as the son of Vyasadeva.
There's one where he gets married. So then there's one where he gets married, I think, because he's mentioned later on in the genealogy somewhere in the 9th canto. Then our acharyas point out that's not the same Vyasa, that's not the same Sukadev. It's a different one because this Sukadev never got married.
He created a duplicate.
Yeah, something like that.
And that duplicate got married and so on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different, channels, and the acharyas explain that different days of Brahma he appeared in different ways.
Alright, we hear that the Bhagavatam relates to past, present and future. So when Sukadeva Swami heard the full Bhagavatam, did he hear his conversation with Maharaj Pariksit? Is that what he heard, or is it something different that he heard? Like the Bhagavatam where Kanada, is that the Bhagavatam that he heard?
Did he hear from Vyasadeva?
Yeah.
We have no way of knowing, but we would assume that because he is very intelligent, he wouldn't distort the words in any way. But we also can say that perhaps something is slightly changed so that it becomes more sweet. That's why it's said to be sweeter when it came out of the mouth of Parikshit Maharaj. Just like we have in the material world, we have, let's say, classical singers. Okay, they have the main words and they sing the song that the previous person sang or whatever, but then when they sing it out of their own emotions, they may embellish it a little bit and make it more attractive or whatever to the present listeners like that. So maybe slightly, altered or something because of the ecstasy of their delivery.
The fruits are, I have practical experience, the fruits are when the birds, like the lorikeets and that, put their beak in.
You taste it afterwards?
You quickly, then it goes off. But just at that point, if you taste it just after they put their beak in, I don't know what happens.
It's very tasty.
But it actually is sweeter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but if you leave it a little bit longer, then it starts to go off.
Okay.
But you've got to get it right at the right time.
Yeah. Well, they have a lot of mangoes here, so they can wait for the cockatoos to bite them, and they can grab the mangoes and see if they're sweeter.
Thank you. My question is similar to Krishna Kirtan. You said that Vyasadeva told his disciples to recite the Bhagavatam to Sukadeva Swami.
Yeah.
But the Bhagavatam is mainly a dialogue between Sukadeva Swami and Maharaj Pariksit. So my question is, which part of the Bhagavatam Sukadeva Swami heard? Because most of the Bhagavatam is himself talking to Maharaj Pariksit. So what's the part that he heard?
Well, whatever, like in Canto 2, then Sukadeva begins speaking, and then Parikshit asks questions, and he speaks. So we can say that's the Bhagavatam he heard. Parikshit asks questions, and then Sukadeva answers. And then within that we get further conversations of Maitreya and Narada Muni and so many other things like that. So that's the main Bhagavatam. And then the first canto and the last part of the 12th canto are Sutta Goswami and Sonaka and others speaking like that. But even in spite of that, we can say, well, then the first canto is not actually Bhagavatam because it's not spoken by Sukadeva. So it's that's not the Bhagavatam. But then our acharyas say, no, it is also Bhagavatam. So the whole thing is Bhagavatam, even if it wasn't spoken by Sukadeva.
So basically he was hearing the story of himself talking to Maharaj Parikshit. Is that what he heard?
He was hearing it?
So you said that.
We can say that the Sukadeva, whatever he spoke, and Parikshit was asking questions and he spoke, so that becomes the Bhagavatam as we know it from the second canto to the 12th canto.
So he heard that before he was talking, like let's say I'm talking to you.
Yeah, so Sukadeva heard it from Vyasadeva, all that information.
Himself talking.
Yeah. No, he Vyasadeva, the same topic, but then he recites all of this to him. Then it takes, of course, a form of a question and answer, but it's the same material.
Okay,
that's
so
all.
basically he was listening to the Bhagavatam in which he was not included.
Yeah, obviously. And then he delivers it through questions of Parikshit, we can say. The same information. Okay. Hare Krishna.